I would like to point out that na beyond this conversation, we're just two young adults who speaking through our own personal opinion, our own individual uh, uh, thoughts. There's a floating around here in the Philippines na constitutional change or cha-cha for that matter. For me, I know a lot of people are divided in this issue kasi uh, I don't know why we're so struggling or really gripping on the 1986 Constitution or dahil lang sa nakaupo ngayon. I don't want to mention that, but
Are we empowering the local? Are we empowering the same local governments who are generally the same trapos, epals, who most of the time inherited their right to these positions by virtue of because they have the same family name. So that's a problem. Uh, while I am open to the fact that uh, the concept of federalism would allow uh, our different the different parts of the country to have a stronger say, not only stronger say, but rather in the exercise of their local governments. The problem with that is what happens when it's the same people but greater power. The same people who is, for example, causing the problems in these parts of Mindanao. I will not say which surnames, but
alright, so we are live. We have Michael Alipio in the podcast. Hello, Mike.
good evening, Kuya Nick.
Again, thank you so much sa pagpunta dito sa maliit na podcast na meron ako. I mean, it's been a year since ini-invite kita and thankfully na available ka na ngayon.
Ah, ayun nga 'no, parang, ah, yun na nga, sorry dahil ano na 'to, matagal-tagal rin 'to. I was, too occupied, 'di ba, with what I'm doing. So ayun, thankfully, I'm still on a break. So ayun, we now have this opportunity to talk about, I guess anything under the sun, di ba? That's the
Yes,
nature of
sir.
podcasts, right?
Yes, sir. Um, okay. So, before all of that, gusto ko lang kamustahin. Kamusta ka? Kamusta yung mental well-being mo? Kasi, I know na hindi biro yung pagdating mo ng law. Um, how are you?
Uh, to answer that question, I think ayun na nga 'no, I recognize naman that this study,
Mm-hmm.
requires, the mental capacity to endure, because the nature of the schooling is not similar to, I would, I would think that the nature of the schooling is not similar to any other forms of education in the country. So, as to that, uh, I'd say na managing naman ako. Better, I guess, compared to last year's. Kasi last year, it was the first year. So, at the time, I was still managing, being introduced to higher studies. And aside from that, dealing with the demands academically and even the mental and physical toll that studying o most of the time, we have to dedicate it to studying, 'di ba? So, to answer again the question, ayun, managing, doing better than, the first year kasi currently now I'm in the second year. So, ano ba, parang ayun na, na-manage na, natuto na, better than before. And as to, mental well-being, I guess that's why we need to take breaks. Right now, I'm in a clan for a vacation, and in this with this vacation, I'm vacationing with my best friend, and ayun, uh, parang at at this at this point wala munang pag-aaral. It's a break, so at this time, nag-e-enjoy muna ako at tomorrow babalik na ako para makapag-aral ulit. So yun, managing, doing better mentally, and with that requires not only the recognizing na mahirap itong pinag-aaralan natin, but also yun na, take times to ayun, pause, to breathe. So ayun, yun ata.
And buti naman nagte-take ka ng break kasi especially last year, we both know na grabe yan lalo na nasa adjusting period ka pa. And hopefully naman sana habang nandiyan ka sa aklan, wala ka nalang libro na nagbabasa ka, walang midnight readings.
Wala naman. I'll
Buti.
reserve that when I get back kasi ayun na nga 'no, nandito ako ngayon, magbakasyon at hindi ko kaya makipagplastikan by bringing books.
True, buti. Much better. Yung comparing the pre-law days and to now, what's the difference? Kasi I understand pagdating sa pre-law, you have to take general, I don't know, general practice. Like for example, business, some people take accounting, that sort of thing. Yung pre-law days mo, ano yung tinake mo?
Ah, yeah. So my pre-law was, international studies. I studied
Mm.
at Ateneo de Zamboanga 'no, and yun na nga, ibang-iba talaga yung
Mhm.
pag-aaral nung pre-law. So nung undergrad pa lang ako and as compared to law school, we first look at again the demands. Kasi eto, dito sa law school, what is required of you is to read. Well, I'm not saying na hindi usual ang mga undergrads na hindi nagbabasa. I meant, the readings that we are given, kasi hindi lang yan cases and hindi sa cases, it can range from, depende sa i-assign ng prof for a specific, period. So maybe for a meeting, you can go from 10 cases, 20. There came a point where in my first year for constitutional law, where there was a day that we were assigned, I think, 30 to 40. Uh, and that's only the cases. There are also readings which include uh, the provisions itself, so in the Constitution or in specific laws. Uh, and then aside from that, if you want to understand what specific provisions mean, you go and refer to what we call a commentary. So usually a legal scholar uh, in a commentary explains that a provision is this, a provision is that. It, it the provision provides this and that, and the commentator in that case comments on such specific provision. Now, again, comparing this with the undergrad where usually you've been given a reading
Mhm.
and it can be short, it can be long, but most of the time, the reading involves uh, the thoughts of a person or persons, and sometimes you don't even need to refer to other references to understand. You only need to read the actual reading. So sometimes, yun na nga, that includes papers, et cetera. So, ayun. Aside from that, the dynamic, kasi, again, this is what we call a professional degree, di ba?
Mhm.
Uh, so, the dynamic kasi no undergrad, I joked around before that I said na, after graduating from senior high, it felt like a continuation lang naman. Uh, but I again, experiences will differ depending on which school, which program, and even personal thoughts. So in my case, when I said that this is a continuation, kasi I've been in Ateneo since senior high. Uh, so parang the nature, I mean, not only the nature, but the rigor of
Mhm.
studying in Ateneo, ayun na nga, which includes the usual readings and reflections, etc. You're usually, ayun na nga, parang makes you want to reflect and think. Now, to compare to the type of readings we have sa law school, again, kasi ika nga nila ang basis natin is cases,
Mhm.
is yung mga cases, and yun na nga, what the Supreme Court says, a law is this, a law is that, it's directly that. Most of the time, you don't need to reflect on it. There's no reflection needed, di ba? Parang, ano ba nga ba? Kasi nga, yun, ano nga ba ang batas? The Supreme Court says, Congress says, ganito, ganyan, then yun talaga yun. So, no reflection. And continuing on the discussion on dynamics, you also look at the people you deal with.
Mhm.
So, most of the time, di ba, when you're in college, uh, tawag dyan, you're dealing with other fellow students who are uh, not working, who are expected to, yun na nga, to study, go home. Usually they don't have work when you're dealing, and again, because this professional school and yung mga nag-aaral nito can range from, in our case, siguro mga early 20s and some even yung mga age can go to 30s, 40s, some of them are already working, etc. So, iba rin ang dynamics dito, no? Uh, we have to deal with people na already have families or who are working. So, aside from studying, they're working, etc. So, again, the dynamic not only to the academic rigors, but also to the people you work with. And siguro to add to that, even your professors, 'di ba?
Mhm.
Ah, kasi sa undergrad ko, ah, yun na nga, ayun, academics. Academics on that ano, in a way, or is based on the study of international studies in a bigger scope, the social sciences. In law kasi iba rin 'to. Ah, eto nga, they all come from different backgrounds, different specializations, ika nga nila. Some full academics, others practicing litigation lawyers in or even a name partner in top law firms. Yung iba makikita mo sa TV, ini-interview, di ba, ng mga CNN, for example. So,
Mhm.
ibang-iba, ibang-iba. And most of the time, most of the time, they have ano nga, parang parang beyond teaching, meron talaga silang full-time work. Compared nung undergrad, siguro most of our instructors are full-time professors in their college. So, ayun siguro, um, parang yun ang difference 'no. Pero I think, i i isisingit ko na lang rin 'no na, if there are questions on pre-law or I think we should discuss siguro 'no, yung concept ng pre-law.
Mhm.
Okey lang ba na
Yeah, go.
pinangungunahan na kita?
No,
Okey.
it's okay
Kas
kasi Mike, one of the reason ko bakit gusto ko rin talaga kita makausap to the previous podcast na meron ako last year is this kasi not a lot of, people talaga na understand this thing. Like, we have the privilege na tuwing magkasama tayo, lagi natin pinag-uusapan to. We talk about na certain things, or especially in politics, we talk the certain way kasi we understand the importance of, conversing about this. So, again, balikan kita doon. So, in terms of pre-law, what's the what you call this, yung differences between the pre-law itself and the actual studying of law, or yung anong tawag doon, yung studying for bar exam.
I think it's too early for me to discuss that.
Mm.
In my
That
case,
is true. Mm.
I'm still in my second year of study, so ayun, too early to discuss
Mhm.
that. No experience yet and not familiar. Pero ano na lang, maybe I can talk about the concept of a pre-law,
Mhm.
especially those who are interested in pursuing a degree in law and people want to become lawyers. So the concept of pre-law, kasi the nature of a law degree in the Philippines, it is solely the Juris Doctor degree. We no longer offer Bachelor of Law. So, what is required is a 4-year degree, any degree, as long as it is 4 years. So, kahit Bachelor of Arts yan, or Bachelor of Science, whether accountancy, political science, biology, information technology, engineering, etc. It does not matter. So if you are a graduate of 4-year degree plus meet the qualifications required by the particular law school that you intend to enroll in. So in the case of, for example, in the University of the Philippines, you are required to have certain units which include English units, mathematics, and social sciences, etc. So, ayun, uh, in generally, you only need, yun na nga, a 4-year degree plus what is required of you by that particular law school. And before, yun na nga, meron talaga, nung mga siguro 30 years, 40 years ago, sorry, 50 years ago, meron talaga kasing degree na par- particularly what they call a pre-law. Pero ngayon hindi na. What is only required is a 4-year degree and requirements needed for each school. Now, siguro on next gen, some people may think so, di ba? One of the things people ask ay, what's the best pre-law? And yun nga, it really depends. Um, yeah, pero eto, again, personal opinion ko lang to. Yeah, if meron man, it will be accountancy. Because much of the subjects provided in the study of law, which, for example, obligations of contracts, sales, agency partnership, uh, yung mga ganong subjects.
Mm.
These are subjects that are already what you call part of the study of accountancy in the Philippines and all over the country, dadaanan at dadaanan talaga nila yan. So, uh, we cannot remove the nature of those subjects, which is which are primarily in line with the study of accountancy. Now, it does not mean that other courses cannot compete. In fact, sa huli, nasa tao pa rin yan. So, yun lang yung opinion
Mm.
ko as to if there's a question on what's the best philo. So, ayun na, and this is based on, ayun na, uh, when we deal sa ating pag-aaral and mapapansin mo naman talaga na sino yung makaka-advance, etc. So, my good friend is an accountant actually. And ano siya, makikita naman natin na ayun, sabi niya nga na eto mga subjects na ito, dinaanan niya na ito nung undergrad. So, parang it feels like taking it for a second time, 'di ba? So, ayun, I'm in my case, I had subjects on um, international law and in particular humanitarian laws and uh, diplomacy and consular laws. So, very particular subsections of international law. International law subjects are in our prospectus, I think, third year pa. And
Mhm.
isa or dalawa, nung undergrad ko, isa or dalawa lang yun. So, I mean, to compare, yung mga law subjects, most of the time they are in the nature of yun na nga, no, dealing with laws on business, transactions, taxes, di ba? So, ayun, that's why nasabi ko accountancy. Pero ayun, again, sa huli, nasa tao pa rin yan. So, if a person is up to the challenge, kahit anong background pa yan, kayang-kaya yan.
Yung reason mo kung bakit ka nag-take ng international law. So before you answer that, let's take a step backwards muna. Um like I said earlier, during mga bata pa tayo, ito na talaga yung pinag-uusapan natin, law, politics, that sort of thing. So, what what happened or ano yung nag-inspired sa'yo na to really take the international law? Kasi if you remember, the way we talk politics is parang hindi ko naman sinasabing adult, pero we're small adults talking like we know things. We know the specific law and sort of thing. Um Sa'yo, what push you sa pag-take ng international law? Kasi I understand na hindi maliban sa hindi siya madali, like wala namang madali sa buhay, pero in terms of that particular uh, course, it takes a more deeper thought, a deeper understanding of kung ano talaga yung gusto mo i-pursue sa career mo.
Oh, I think what you're referring to here, Kuya Nick, is my undergrad, no? Which is
Mhm,
international
mm,
studies. Isa lang ang international law, or like is international humanitarian law,
mhm,
and yung consular and diplomatic affairs. those are ano lang parang, subjects or courses in that degree. So where did it all began? So, last night I was telling my friend na ano na, I recall nung pagkabata ko meron akong mapa and in this map shows yun, countries, their borders, their economies, the people they have, et cetera, et cetera. So yun, siguro, growing up, no, yun, I was fascinated by the concept of, uh, in that case, we would later have a term for this, what we now call international relations, di ba? Pero nung bata pa tayo, what we only see are maps with details as to
Mhm.
economies, politics, types of government, the people inside, etc. Uh, Now, nung ano ko, na yun na nga, no, naalala ko rin na matatanda na pala talaga tayo, no? Parang dati lang we were exercising our dominion over who
Mhm.
gets to sit
Mhm.
in Tatay Nell's chair, 'di ba? In a way, ayun, what we're already exercising are what we can call in international studies as,
Mhm.
the control, influence, over something. So in that case, it is a chair. Pero yun, yun na nga, bata pa lang tayo, eh. Nandiyan meron na nga tayong interest diyan, 'no? Ah, I guess it all began as a curiosity from looking at the maps and then, kahit nung bata pa naman ako may interest naman ako sa pagbabasa ng current events. Hindi lang pagbabasa ah, pati pakikinig na rin sa radyo, tingin sa TV. Ayun na nga 'no, parang bata pa lang tayo nagka-interest na tayo as to the general state of affairs, not only in our country and outside. I am lucky enough to continue this, interest, when I was in senior high. I graduated uh, with a, uh, high school diploma specialized on humanities and social sciences. And again, in the undergrad, I graduated with a international studies degree. And this involves, again, what we've been interested in since our childhood, which is the general affairs, not only of our state, but also the state of other countries all over the
Mhm.
world. So, kung meron man talagang influence, it's probably that a child who was interested as to what is happening inside and outside of his country.
Tas naalala ko pa yun, every time we do read newspapers, sasabihin sa atin, "Bata ka pa, nagbabasa ka na yan, para ka na matanda." Like, kung sa mga audience na nai-imagine niyo, imagine two small kids na holding newspapers like this, like they're old enough to really understand it. Um, with that, what what is the reason kung bakit you have a great school, you graduated on a great institution like Ateneo de Zamboanga. And I think na meron din silang great program for law itself. So why transfer from Zamboanga to Cebu? Kasi
Uh,
kasi
Actually,
you
oo.
have to understand, maybe some people syempre, who are also in a particular situation na katulad sa'yo na once na, like for example, graduate ka na in a great institution like Ateneo, why would I move to Cebu, or why would I move to Manila for just to study law? Now, for your situation, um what is it what is it with Cebu, and bakit Cebu, or even sa Cebu State?
Ah, no, no, ayun yan, hindi ako sa Iloilo ako nag-aaral sa extension ng ano,
Oh.
sa extent ang UP Diliman, its law school has an extension in Visayas now. Paano ako napadpad dito, which is
Mhm.
Iloilo, kasi nung nag-take ako ng exam, of course, it was without the expectation of, passing kasi the examination, the UP LAE, the aptitude exam for, again, law studies, it's a very, very competitive exam, and you're dealing, and not only dealing with, but also competing in a nationwide scale as to, uh, to obtain a slot uh, in UP College of Law. So siguro, nung tinake ko yun wala naman expectation nun, I was already expecting to enroll in either of the two law schools in Zamboanga, Ateneo ni Western Mindanao, two great law schools as well.
Yeah, two great
Uh,
law schools lalo na sa Mindanao.
Oo, but nung nalaman ko nakapasa ako and the opportunity kasi, so in my case, who would want to pass an opportunity to obtain a law degree in UP. In my case, nung undergrad din I passed the APCAT. Mag-enroll na sana for a communication degree in Cebu. I think yun na yung Cebu question. So,
So I
ayun.
mixed the two. My bad. I mixed the two.
Oo, okey lang, okey lang, okey lang. Pero yun na nga sa Cebu sana, sa UP Cebu kasi,
Mhm.
ah, meron ah, ayun na nga, may roots of, my family, ano, the Alipios, can be traced, to Cebu. So ayun, dun. As to Iloilo naman wala talaga akong roots dito 'no, wala akong kilala, wala tayong kapamilya dito. So yun, ah, pa ah no, yun na nga, one is the opportunity to study, and even perhaps graduate in such a prestigious institution. Siguro second din, knowing uh, the situation nung bansa at the time when I took the exam and found out I passed. During those times ay ano ako, ah, ah, natuna ako pero tayo lahat ay dumadaan pa sa pandemya, 'di ba? Hindi
Mhm.
pa tapos 'yan, kalagitnaan pa lang 'yun, I was still in my undergrad.
Mhm.
Ah, Ayun na nga and masasabi natin because, UP is operated by the government. So one can expect that the tuition will not be as expensive. So ayun na nga, uh, the thing with Ateneo, of course, Ateneo is without a doubt expensive. Expensive. Ayun na nga. Eh, ka kasi grabe na rin naman din na ino-offer nila, no? Parte talaga yon. Pero ayun na nga, comparing the expected cost. So yun, parang magandang school at the same time, the tuition is manageable. So and at the time kasi pandemya pa rin nun 'no,
Mhm.
ah, parang limited ang movement. So parang at the time I never imagined myself, yun na nga moving pa to Manila given the situation. Soaring prices, movements are limited, 'di ba? And ayun na nga, you'll have to look for places, food, et cetera. So ayun, parang mahirap. Thankfully, parang when I took the exam a year ago, nag-open ang UP College of Law ng extension classes in Iloilo and sabi ko, yun na nga knowing, given the financial constraints, so sige why not Iloilo? Kahit wala akong kakilala, walang-wala talaga, so start from scratch, ayun. So ayun, kaya ako napadpad sa Iloilo.
So before we move on, gusto ko lang talaga ding malaman why take law? Kasi here's the thing. I mean, like kung sinasabi na maging lawyer ka, that sort of thing. Sinasabi mo rin na gusto mo rin maging lawyer. Pero remove all of that in your mind and in your individual uh like individual self. Why take law?
So are you expecting an answer from Michael Alipio or would you expect an answer from a person who is thinking about taking up law?
You
Paano
know
ba
what?
ano ba ang expectation?
That's a great point. I think let's go with Michael Alipio first. Kasi
Sige.
I again, ito yung ginagawa natin ng mga bata natin. But ako, in fact, even I was a child, my mindset was on business. Which is dun tayo nagkakatugma. Kasi other than, I'm not saying that you're a business-minded person, but the way we see the world is different. So, yun yung mas nagiging intriguing sa atin dalawa na we have a conversation between two different worlds. So, for Michael Alipio, why take law?
So again, for Michael Alipio, Uh, kasi at the time, no, I intended sana to become a college instructor, to be honest, because
Oh,
I really
wow.
want to work in the academe, no? Contribute to not only the creation, but also the facilitation of knowledge to students. When I took the exam, it was to first as to my interest only to why not give it a shot, di ba? Kung kaya. Tingnan natin. Wala naman 'tong kasiguraduhan.
Mm-hmm.
Pero later 'no, na-realize ko how, studying law and this would be a common thought among other law students as well, that when you study law, you get to understand, what's happening in this country, not only in a sense involving the greater or national scale issues, such as, changing the constitution or even to the environment, health, etc. But also, you get to know the workings of the government as to your rights as well. Many of the things, or almost all of the things that I learned in law school, in particular, as to my right, ayun na nga, came as a surprise because uh, before studying law, you would imagine na, ito, meron ka ganitong right, pero you won't actually know the nuance as to how you can exercise it or the importance of exercising it. Ah, for example, yun na nga your, ah, yung, life, liberty, property, 'di ba? You look at it, karapatan kung, ah, remove the legal lens, you look at it as karapatan ng mabuhay, may-ari, at, ah, ag sa kalagitnaan ay yung maging malaya. Pero yun na nga, when you study law, you can look at the nuance. For example, when we look at property, kasi when you look at property rights, you look how, for example, you can protect it. Example, in ang mga ahente ng gobyerno, so halimbawa ay mga, pulis or kahit ang mga ahente ng mga ah, administrative agencies ng ating bansa. Hindi lang yan sila pwede pumasok sa bahay mo, 'di ba? If they want something, they need a search warrant, et cetera. So ayun, parang you get to understand, ganito pala. So that in the case where ako, parang kung ako, magkakaproblema sa future which requires at least, basic understanding of the government process or even how the government works. So ayun, mapapaisip ka lang, "Uy, I'm thankful for a legal education for, making me understand this or that." Parang may naalala tuloy ako, I remember, I think it was last month where, uh a former schoolmate from the senior high and college asked me something involving the involving, kasi ano siya, involving labor issues kasi ano siya, nagtatrabaho siya as a, parang human resources, officer ng isang, ah, kumpanya sa Zamboanga. I will not go into detail, pero nagtanong siya anong puwede niyang gawin. Sabi ko, "What I can suggest to you, based on my understanding or not only understanding but study of same even, currently taking up, labor law 2, so kasi 2 parts yung, labor law subjects namin. So ito yung natutunan namin. Pero again, importante diyan na sinabi ko na, I'm not giving you, legal advice. This is not a legal advice. I am not, licensed to give advice. What I am doing only is to share to you what I've learned, in particular as to, rights of workers. Kaya so ito sabi ko, ito ang mga karapatan ng ating mga manggagawa at bilang isang, bilang isang, ah, parang HR practitioner in this office, kasi she asked about an issue involving, management versus the employee. So, ayon sa mga kasong ito, ayon sa batas natin, may karapatan sabi ko pa, meron tayong konsepto sa ating labor and I think generally in due process, yun na nga, notice and hearing. So, if if your company intends to, what we call, suspend an employee, you need to give notice, and you need to give the hearing, so an opportunity for, the worker, not only the management to be heard as to such issues. And ayun na nga 'no, and later nagpasalamat siya, thank you, thank you Mike kasi, ano nga, ano ba, parang yun nga, parang she was able to successfully maneuver, uh, uh, an uh, an issue involving management versus employee. So sabi ko, ano, again, what I'm only sharing to you is what I've learned. Ito yung natutunan ko and uh, salamat naman at nakatulong tayo. So again, to clarify, in case mapakinggan tayo ng may mag-report sa future sa Supreme Court nitong podcast na ito na that was not an exercise of what we call parang that was not an exercise of what we call uh, of a practice of a practice of law or practice of a lawyer. What I only given what I only gave to this friend of mine was the yun na nga to what I've learned as to what I've learned sa labor law as to how this should be resolved. So yun 'no, parang parang in a way hindi lang ako parang naka parang natuto sa pag-aaral dito sa Pusya, pati naman ay, um, na na naipabahagi natin sa iba. Kahit estudyante pa lang tayo na 'di ba, parang in a way we've transferred knowledge din na, okey ganito. Ito ang mga karapatan ng mga manggagawa. And if you're going to work as an HR officer, you should respect that kasi parte naman talaga yan na kanilang mga karapatan, which sabi nga sa ating batas, yun na nga 'no, an a labor contract or yun na nga, a contract of labor, is one imbued with, public interest, 'di ba? Kasi nga this involves rights of workers which are specific to them. So ayun, parang, um, satisfaction of knowing na you are able to share knowledge na rin sa others, especially those who have no background in at least a basic understanding of our legal systems or even as to basic such as to their rights. So parang gano'n. So parang one, again, to answer the question, my take up personally, one, because there was an opportunity. Two, ayun na nga, exercising and ayun na, applying what you've learned, is very, very helpful in many cases because the study of law is not only specific to one field. You can go, you usually have many parts of laws where you have to study. Yun, sumosobra na ako. Very yapper, pero yun, ano nga, parang example, you have to be familiar with uh, concepts of from what we've learned. Example, in versus family relations, the idea of you need psychological background, not only a background, siguro you need to at least have an understanding of psychology kasi you're going to deal with, example, a concept of psychological incapacity, which is under Article 36 of the Family Code, or in your case, Kuya Nick, no, you're dealing with business. So the primary course talaga in law school, which is the basic for the advanced subjects as to that is obligations and contracts, di ba? What are obligations? What are contracts? Ganito ang obligation, ganito ang contract. So you have to understand ganito. So and then you'll deal with cases involving businesses, breach of contract, or mga ganito, ganyan, there was delay, etc. So, ayun, parang all goes back to the concept of, yun, maganda pala na alam natin to. Ganito pala ang kontrata. So, gano'n lang. Example lang yan.
I mean, that's great. I mean, at least you have like, the vision na simula bata pa lang na ito yung interest mo gawin. Once the opportunity kicks in, you grab it by the neck, then go with it. I mean,
Ah,
I mean, like with that. So, in terms naman sa like you mentioned earlier, mas maganda ng alam natin bawat individual, our rights in our constitution. But for the people naman who are still, I'm not s- I'm not I'm not gonna use the word struggle, but still confused on whether they want to pursue taking up law. Kasi um I heard this story a bunch na a lot of people take bar exam at least 5 to 6 times. And some people na magte-take 2, hindi nakapasa, mada-down na, hindi na itutuloy. But there are really some people who wants to be a lawyer takes 5 to 7 bar exam, even up until their 50s. Nagte-take pa rin sila ng bar exam because they want to be a lawyer. Now, again, going back, sa mga still confused if law is for them, or law, they want to take up law, what are the advices na pwede mong ma-insight na, okay, if you want to take up law, this should be your mindset, this should be your thinking, or if gusto mo maging lawyer, ito dapat yung mindset na meron ka.
Again, no, siguro I'll only limit this conversation as to yun na nga for what can drive a regular person to pursue this study kasi as to yun na nga what happens when you're a lawyer or what happens when you take the bar exam,
That's
I think it's
different
too
na eh.
early.
Yeah, it's too early to talk
Oo,
pa, but at this early stages, na you're in the middle of law, you're going through the middle of it. Para sa mga taong hindi pa nakakarating doon or gustong marating yang nasa pwesto mo ngayon, what are the advices that you can give at this early time? Kasi we understand you're
ah,
still in the middle. You have a lot of experience na kailangan mo pang matutunan. But at at your case, you're in the middle of it, you're in the thick of it, ano yung magandang advices siguro?
ah, siguro ano na lang 'no, as to some, there's a person out there who's interested in pursuing the study of law,
Mhm.
what advice can I give to them as a person who's puhon-puhon, hopefully, is finishes, half of the required years in the study. Number one, uh, yun na nga, prepare yourself to an experience which requires, not only demands, but also requires a person to go above and beyond. Again, uh, this is a degree that is professional in nature. You are already everyone who's studying law uh, expected, not all expected, but also required na may 4-year degree. So, yun na nga, hindi na ito tulad nung sa undergrad. So, again, you should prepare to the requirements, and this includes yun na nga, uh, the costs. So this is not only mental kasi you're going to have to study, and then sadly makikita mo na lang 'di ba sa mga post ng friends mo or sa IG for example na, uy, nagbabakasyon sila or uy, ganito na they're outside na ganito, ganyan. So again, mental 'no, na kasi you have to spend, hours and hours of studying and then hours, not only studying 'no, I think, I've been discussing studying lang pero, beyond studying is that you have to appear sa classes, and then you are expected to recite cases, laws, and yun na nga, to answer questions which most of the time naman, nasa coverage, but sometimes, beyond what was given as a coverage. So yun, there are also ano, parang the physical toll kasi yun na nga 'no, mapapaisip ka na lang, maybe I can, skip a meal, to spend time to study kasi I have an exam, et cetera. There's also, of course, the unspoken, ano thing is financial demands. Books, very, very expensive. Uh, if you are lucky enough to be studying in a school where you can be a scholar or yun na nga, generally less than the average of the tuition. So ayun, kahit tanggalin mo naman ang tuition, magasto din dito sa books, materials, papeles, you have to study sa mga highlighters, some would, uh, kasi some professors will ano yun parang mag-a-allow ng digital notes so if that's one of your things or even yun na nga, kung hindi kaya yung ano, minsan magpapa-schedule naman ng professors ng mga online class. So, ayun, dapat may laptop ka or may device ka where you can attend your class. So, na it's really unspoken kasi most of the time, one can think of the study of law as something romantic kasi 'di ba, you're going to fight for the rights of ordinary Filipinos from near and far, etc. So, ayun, yes, yun na nga, marami naman talaga nag-aabogado dahil doon, pero yun na nga, again, the cost talaga demanding, and it's really expected of anyone to spend sa mga books. And hindi lang ito yung books ng batas, books rin ng, again, commentaries, di ba? Eh, if yung prof mo merong required ano, papa-xerox ka, kung meron kang copies, gano'n. So ayun 'no, yung parang number one is, be ready or be prepared for what is required of you in this professional degree. Siguro number two, ah, before ka sa law school, ang masasabi ko lang ay relax ka muna. Kasi meron iba, well, it's an acquired thing 'no, pero, depende na 'yan sa inyo. Pero some would want to study before, pero masasabi ko enjoy niyo na 'yan kasi iba pa rin yung actually na nandito ka na, enrolled ka na, na nag-aaral, iba 'to nga 'no, kumpara sa undergrad. So ayun, kung puwede enjoy muna ang buhay mo dahil demanding. So connected sa number one. And then siguro last, parang tip na maibibigay ko ay siguro naman, think of your why. Why why law school? Siguro, ah, in my case 'di ba, I said na because there was an opportunity. Pero yun, I think, most people should think, as to their purpose, as to why 'di ba? I think it was the, philosopher Nietzsche who said, "He was a why to live can bear almost anyhow." Yan sabi ni Nietzsche, I like that quote. So yun, kasi nga mahirap 'to, demanding, and yun na nga iba pa rin ang pag-aral before law school and when you're in law school. So, those 2 points I've made earlier, yeah, can, lead to my point number three, which is, yun, find your why, find the right why, bakit mo ba 'to ipu-pursue. If puwede namang trip-trip lang, go ahead. Pero if you want to survive in an environment where, it's cutthroat, kailangan mong, tumindig parati. So, kasi nga gano'n talaga itong professional school na ito, ayun, find your reason, find your why. Why do we do this? Bakit ako nag-e-enroll and ganyan. Ganyan ang I think yun yung tatlo kong maibibigay.
Wow, that's great. Um, Before we move on to the next topic, I would like to point out that na beyond this conversation, we're just two young adults who speaking through our own personal opinion, our own individual uh uh thoughts, and don't take everything in a grain of salt. Now, with that being said, um, let's talk about the journalism state here in the Philippines. One of the reason why I really push to start a media company is, you remember what happened to Rappler? I think 2 years ago, 3 years ago na there's a lot of issue going about the uh, foreign investment, that sort of thing. The founder of eBay was one of the biggest investor on Rappler, and that became a huge, I think, huge scandal or huge issue, because a lot of not a lot of people understand really na bakit yung foreigner who is, invest a lot of money in a media space, because here in the Philippines, here in our constitution, um only foreigners can hold 40% of the company. uh for that case, lalo na sa media space, foreigners are not allowed to hold any corporate stock here in the Philippines. So one of the reason or I mean, the main reason why I started the media company is to really contribute to the media landscape, especially in the world of journalism. I know media space right now is tough for business wise, pero I didn't hindi ko na siya pinush through, or hindi ko siya inisip na paano ako kikita dito, more on the business side, but more on how can I contribute to deliver facts and deliver real journalism here in the country, because a lot of fake news are out there. With that being said, um there's issue right now about the protection of journalism. Now, um what do you think about how can we as journalists, I'm not calling myself journalist, but in general sense, how can a journalist protect his work, protect his integrity? Because may mga news talaga that needed to be, need to be published for the Filipino to know. But the head, the head of the head office, or the head of yours is, strict, parang kino-compress yung information na dapat i-publish. So, in your sense, how can a journalist, be like fully have a full confidence to say, "Hey, this is my work, and I don't need to worry about my livelihood and my safety."
Yun nga 'no, first siguro, I'd like to, yun na nga 'no, parang recognize, your effort in starting a media company, Kuya Nick 'no, at a time where, we see a situation where, difficult, to be on the side, trying, to report to the masses, what's happening. So ayun, I congratulate you on that and
Thank
hope
you,
you
thank
for the
you.
best, 'di ba? Now as to ano, for example, those in the field of journalism and even communication as a whole, I'll call it na lang na
Mm.
those who, practice in the field of communication as a whole, uh, the most important thing that one should have is integrity. Now, let's accept it. Integrity does not sell. If you want to make money, if you want to, ayun na nga, if you want to consider this as a business, so ayun, most of the time, if purely for in purely for the reasons of your passion or integrity or your want of what we call a more transparent society, then most of the time you won't expect money from that, no? Pero yun, uh, kaya malaki ang bilib natin sa mga taong, nagpapatuloy pa rin ang paggagawa ng tama at in case when they report news or when they communicate, through their communication, they retain, or they continue to do it, with integrity. Ah, ang masasabi ko na lang talaga diyan ay yun na nga, you'll need integrity at second to that ay kailangan mo ng lakas ng loob or ano, kasi again, it's dangerous. I recall I recall hearing a joke. There's a joke from like a year ago. Said the joke was along the lines of we're the greatest the greatest award in journalism is getting shot, 'di
God
ba? Kasi nga
damn.
kasi nga, we recognize that uh, this is a dangerous field, telling the truth. Kasi yun na nga 'no, narratives and power over people. So yun, integrity and guts. I have some ayan, Facebook friends so who are in this field and, uh, yun na nga 'no, and they continue to, work in this field, for decades na and yun, importante nga integrity, not only integrity pati lakas ng loob and it sustain them. They're working for, national, media, so ayun na nga, I think such as, Rappler. So ganyan, again, yun lang talaga, integrity at lakas ng loob and if you can, continue doing it, please do. Kasi yun na nga, it's not a popular thing to do, but di ba, if tama naman ang ginagawa mo, then I think a person can sleep better at night, di ba? So, yun lang naman talaga masabi ko. And it's best talaga to, ayun, my favorite line, best line I always say to my friends, di ba, na make good choices. Yun talaga, no? Make good choices. Again, it's up to you talaga sa huli. Pero, ayun na nga, integrity and gaps, you'll survive. I hope. And let's hope na hindi mo makukuha yung best award in journalism. Joke. So yun na masasabi ko.
Mm. If that happens to me, just ko hindi ko, I don't know, sana hindi. I mean, well, kasi the goal of this entire show is to really have an open discussion about a certain or controversial things. Like, I don't know, let's say, like for example, I know sex is still taboo. I mean, sex education is still taboo, but we have to talk these things. We have to have a conversation about these things. Now, in the world of journalism, we understand naman na it's hard, especially kung halimbawa restrained ka, and not everyone is a journalist. Like, gusto ko lang i-point out the difference between journalists and other people is just a publisher. Journalists who have to go through rigorous format or rigorous process to really deliver first the news. Meron silang sinusunod na format, may sinusunod silang editorial guidelines to really to first publish a story. And for ordinary people, we just publish. We're just a publisher. Like me, I don't consider myself a journalist because unang-una, I'm just a publisher. I'm just a guy who has a microphone, and that's it, and just voicing my opinions. With that being said, take it as a grain of salt na a lot of people who are also publisher who publishes fraudulent things, who publishing um fake news. I know we have sa law about tackling that. We have cyberbullying, we have cyber libel, that sort of thing. Ito yung gusto ko itanong, Mike, kasi in terms of cyber libel and cyberbullying, let's separate it for first. So, una muna cyber libel. Here's the thing. For me, libel protects all journalism. Kasi meron kang, if you publishing fake things, may pwede kang kasuhan ng cyber libel, that sort of thing. Now, if you're a journalist who's just publishing a story that is based on what you saw and what you experienced, now you publish that, someone will use that cyber libel as an excuse na hindi totoo yung sinasabi mo. For me, that law goes two in hand kasi pwede siya i-abuse ng mga bigger people, and pwede siya ma-protect ng uh, prominent figures. Now, dun sa first one sinabi ko, how do you see this cyber libel na law na we have? Kasi it's very I'm not saying confusing for me, but more on, it goes two side of the same coin eh. You can't really say na protect as a journalist, sabihin mo protected ka or malaking tulong tong cyber libel kasi pwedeng gamitin yung cyber libel sa eh. Like, pwede ka makulong 10 years down the line eh. So, what are your thoughts about the cyber libel, and how is it protecting people, especially in the media space?
Ganito na lang, no, tama ka na it's like, double-edged sword naman talaga 'tong concept natin na, cyber libel, in relation to yun na nga, what we do in journalism, or in what people do in publishing news, etc. In my case, this has been a consistent view naman that I support the decriminalization of cyber libel, or in fact offers of libel talaga. Para pananaw ko na hindi na dapat ito maging krimen dahil ayun nga 'no, parang mapapaisip kasi mapapaisip tayo na yun na nga, sabi mo nga, some people, those who are in power might, abuse this, 'di ba? In fact, we recognize naman in certain, cases by the Supreme Court where, for example, nire-recognize naman na the imbalance between the power relations of someone who's, for example, a politician over a regular citizen, na nag-post siya online, et cetera, 'di ba? Ah, pero yun na nga, ako consistent naman ang pananaw ko that we have to, that's for me again to decriminalize, libel kasi, uh, what while we recognize naman that what we're trying to prevent here is to prevent, uh, the malicious, making of statements over other persons, but I think, there is no need for me lang, na there's no need to include a penal clause to that. Our uh, our civil law provides naman, the what we call in in the civil code, we have what we call, the concept of, in the Article 9, 'di ba? Where a person when exercising their rights, so in this case involving, for example, your free speech, 'di ba? Na parang, uh, ayun, you have to do it with, for example, good faith, 'di ba? Parang, and if there's a breach to that, again, if it's the breach is contrary to morals, good customs, I think that's Article 21, then, your recourse is through the civil courts. Again, civil. We don't need to have a penal element to the concept of cyber libel. Hindi, para sa akin, hindi na dapat tayo nagpapakulong diyan. Puwede mong kasuhan, in a civil court because you would feel na, there was, in the case, abuse of rights, if this abuse of right were for example made by a journalist, then yun ang sagot mo na I can always file in the civil courts, and in those civil courts, they will recognize naman your rights as fellow Filipino to be protected from, again, the abuse of another's rights, in relation to yours. So ayun, I have always thought of this as a civil matter which should not require either, the penal or criminal element to it. Uh, Yun. So, para sa'kin yun lang, we have laws dealing with human relations naman, so yun na yun. Yun talaga ang pananaw ko. It's a double-edged sword, yes, but should we lock up people, and in some cases, journalists talaga ang targeted? No, should not. Let the civil courts decide if mukhang malicious, mukhang not done in good faith, so yung, journalist has posted something in bad faith, then kasuhan mo and ask the court for, uh, a compensation financially, 'di ba? So ayun, para sa'kin yun na yun, kulong hindi. So yun, I think that's the best way we can encourage, uh, ayun, well, encourage the sense of, the expression, or to encourage, writing about things, reporting about things online, and at the same time, not fear the possibility of going to prison. Maybe the possibility of, being fined, perhaps, not, in the concept of penal law, but being made to compensate your, for example, person, 'di ba? Because of your abuse of your rights. So yun lang ang pananaw ko. In summary, I want to decriminalize any form of libel, cyber or not.
True, and I agree na mas magandang i-fine ang journalists who are stating or publishing malicious things rather than putting them into prison. Kasi if you're a journalist who have a great story to tell, especially about the powers in the Philippines or the powers who holds powers in the Philippines, um, hindi mo siya ipapalpish kagad kasi alam mong meron kang kulungan sa likod mo eh, at your back of your mind na pwede makulong dahil sa powers who's abusing this. With that being said naman, um, in terms of cyberbullying, we have a law that is, anti-bullying or cyberbullying. Here's the thing. Um, I don't know if you know this issue na may teacher na nag-publish about saying threatening things about our former president Duterte, that sort of thing. Now, kinulong siya kasi dahil you're threatening, basically you're threatening the president of the Philippines. Now, nung nabasa ko yung statement niya na it is under his freedom of speech. Here's my thing. If there's a fine line between expressing your constitutional rights and threatening someone. There should be a borderline between the two. Cyberbullying is the same. When you threatening someone over online, that should be considered cyberbullying kasi you're putting fear on the other people by like physically threaten them. My case naman, you're just stating, I don't know, you're just critiquing someone in power. Like let's say si Michael Alipio is mayor ng Iloilo. Tapos I said some criticizing things about Michael John Alipio, the mayor of Iloilo. Pwede niya akong kasuhan ng cyberbullying kasi he thinks na binubully ko siya online. But the difference is I'm just criticizing his work as a mayor. So with cyberbullying, how how does it work in terms sa court? Kasi it's it's the same as the cyber libel. It's a double-edged sword.
Yes, siguro in general ko na lang 'to sasagutin 'no,
Mm.
yun again, as I've mentioned previously na meron talagang imbalance between a person who's in power and a person who's not and usually, hindi ba, uh, if meron tayong reklamo, most of the time we go online and post about it and yun na nga, this might be, used against you by any politician and yun na nga, it still depends on the nature of what you post, 'di ba? Ah, if these are threats, 'di ba, parang iba na rin ata yun. Pero in general naman, the courts, in many decisions recognize the existence of this imbalance of power and, uh, I recall reading in some cases nga involving, uh, yun na 'no, libel is the fact that, politicians should not be, onion skin, 'di ba? Na ayun naman, ah, parte naman talaga ng ating karapatan yung ika nga sinasabi nila that, ah, a person can petition the in I think under the Bill of Rights, a person's ability to petition the government uh, to basically, resolve your grievances or redress. Uh, so ayun, parang I think this goes, both ways kasi again, in many court decisions sinasabi naman nila we recognize there's a difference in power and then let's look at the statements you made. When you made a statement online, titingnan ng court, sabi nila, well, hindi naman ito something done in, good faith 'no? It was really intended to, if not be, malicious to ayun na nga, to say things to person that to say things, against a person and then yun na nga, it's masasabi natin going beyond na. So, usually in those cases ayun na nga, hinahatulan naman ng korte ng libel. Pero in some cases na rin where ma-observe naman natin na mukhang the purpose of the statement made, was to ayun na nga, to hold a politician accountable. Then usually sinasabi ng korte na, well, given the imbalance of powers between the two, parties, one that is a politician and one that is not, then the court will say, well, ayun na nga, while we might see that this statement is damaging but our laws provide na ayun, na mukhang ano naman ito, parte naman ng karapatan nila ito. So again, it always boil down to how you make your statement as yun na nga, whether you're a journalist or you're a regular citizen, how you make your statement, why you do it in the first place, 'di ba, ang point mo, 'di ba, if your core intention was to, yun na nga, uh, incite a possible fear or to threaten someone to do not do something, 'di ba? So, parang that is beyond your rights, hindi na yun karapatan. Ah, so ayun, it always boils down to anong purpose nun. So, thankfully, our laws involving yun na nga, making such statements include the idea that, uh Itong mga politicians naman talaga expected talagang makatanggap ng reklamo. So ayun. So parang thankfully naman, gano'n ang pananaw ng ating batas tungkol sa mga ganyang statement. So ayun. Pero sa huli, kung puwede naman talaga ulit, repeating my previous point, decriminalize na lang natin 'yan. Now, parang gano'n na talaga. So but again, in relation to what uh what you said about yun na nga cyberbullying 'no, na ayun, kasi when you say bullying 'di ba, you're harassing someone and, you're basically harassing someone online then clearly that is beyond what is your right to free speech. So kung gano'n naman, then if it's deemed as cyberbullying, then dapat ka talaga hatulan kasi gano'n ang batas natin. Ah, Again, the courts will look into the statements a person makes, online, or made online rather, sorry. So titingnan nila 'yun and ano ba talagang point, ah ang purpose mo talaga nito is to harass or only to exercise his right to express something. So, yun talaga in general as to how, courts would look into such cases.
And hopefully naman, like, people are listening to this or even, watching this in the future, think before you post, because although we have a strong, let's say we have a strong freedom of speech here in the country, but it doesn't mean that you have to, degrade someone or say malicious things to someone or even threatening someone. There's a fine line between threatening someone than criticizing someone. That's two different things, people. You have to remember that. Mike, I know you're still in the middle of your law school. Gusto ko tong tanongin kasi in the states they have a jury. They have a jury system where you're selecting people who are there to, to decide of whether you're guilty or not. Why in the Philippines walang jury system here? We're in a judge. I don't know what is it called. Sorry. Anong tawag doon? Like yung judge ang magko-call or magde-decide.
Yun nga 'no, I think tama na yun na parang it's a system where yun na nga, the decision is, vested upon the judge, upon determination of the facts and circumstances, presented in any of the judicial proceedings, whether,
Mm.
civil or criminal. So, parang yun naman, I think you're what you're comparing this is to again the jury system in not only the United States but I think certain countries in the world uh, have this jury system. No, uh, I'm sorry, I cannot recall if we ever had that in our history. Pero as to this, siguro 'yan yung nakikita natin sa mga series 'di ba na parang, they will, parang 'di ba the American judicial, system,
Mhm.
will look into the jury of your peers or
Mhm.
people who's going to judge you 'di ba, et cetera. As compared sa, ah, Pilipinas wala naman tayong ganyan pero, ah,
Wait, sorry
pero
Mike. Sorry
sure,
to cut you off. Yeah, during
ah,
the 1935 Constitution, wala tayong 1935 Constitution, wala ba tayong jury system na every time na may pupunta or may, case in the court, wala talaga tayong jury system even the 1935 Constitution?
ayun, I think, I'll have to read on this one 'no, kasi I'm not
Mhm.
familiar if we ever exercised such,
Mm.
jury system, but again, 'yun in our case and recalling previous cases then, ayun this is exercised by the courts the Supreme Court and through the lower courts and then their decisions are usually embodied by the person who has the authority, which is usually a judge. And later, if you go to the collegial court, which is the Court of Appeals, the Supreme Court, so yun, the associate justices. Uh, to answer that, siguro, should we have a jury system in the Philippines? Pananaw ko lang naman ito, and I should uh, enlighten myself to this, not only as to the history of the jury system, but also whether this was practiced in the Philippines or not. Pero should we? I don't think so. Kasi,
Wait, wait.
uh,
Okay, so before you continue,
ah,
I wanna input na if for me, I think mas maganda magkaroon ng jury system
mm,
sa Pilipinas because here's the thing. Um I know not all judges are like this, pero there's this notion na kapag kapag mahirap ka, wala kang justice. That let's say broadly speaking, yun yung sinasabi kapag mahirap ka, wala kang ustisya. When it comes if merong jury system dito sa Pilipinas, ang mangyayari magiging pantay-pantay lahat 'yan because uh, para lang sa kaalaman ng iba, kapag ang jury kasi may selection process 'yan. Ngayon kapag selected ka as a jury, lalo na kapag may case kang may hearing ka sa case, um ang number one rule nila doon is bawal mo basahin yung case first hand. Dapat nalalaman mo yung case on that specific day, on that specific case. Then bawal ka mag research online and bawal kang makipag uh, communicate between the defendant and the what do you call this? The defendant and the I forgot, sorry. Namimetal ba ako? The defendant and then yung anong tawag dun? Sorry,
plaintiff.
Michael. Plaintiff. Yun, sorry. The defendant and plaintiff, bawal mo silang kausapin if you're a member of a jury. So, with that being the case, I think mas maganda na sigurong I think for me I'm speaking on on myself na if magkaroon tayo ng jury system dito sa Pilipinas, I think mas magiging pantay-pantay na, especially the judgment. What do you think?
Uh, Ganito na siguro ang pananaw ko, no?
Mm-hmm.
Looking as to the judgment, no form of no form of judicial system will ayun, re-recognize naman na no form of judicial system, whether it is by jury or ayun na nga, or the opposite, would provide us a perfect judicial system, or basically a perfect administration of justice through the courts. Pero ayun, siguro just sharing my personal thought into this is that uh, parang ayun na nga, kahit anong sistema man yan, it will be imperfect. But in the case of the Philippines, I would think that it's impractical, knowing yun na nga, uh, what is yun na nga, the overhaul of the existing system. I still don't think that there was an ever practiced in the Philippines, the jury system was ever practiced in the Philippines. Also, we also have to look at how juries are all most of the time, if not all the time, are usually persons that have no understanding uh, of the laws. Now, I'm not saying that uh, regular persons should be removed from the exercise of justice. But what I'm saying is that uh, because what we're looking here is to administer laws, and the administration of laws is the administration of justice, then a person who's knowledgeable as to how the Constitution provides justice, then they should be better left not to the juries, because juries, given those circumstances that you provided, which include the limitation as to what they'll know about the case, or as to defendants or the plaintiff's part of the case, when we talk about juries, and then we try to again, what you've said, or the circumstances you've provided entail that there is what we call trying to make them be independent or be able to allow them to decide freely and not be affected. But then again, that that may provide us a situation where because a person would have, for example, is that familiar to example, our laws on evidence or our laws on what is required of what ev- pieces of evidence are presented, etc., then maybe because the jury said this while our laws provide this, then maybe it will create a situation where maybe the defendant would later again appeal in higher courts.
Mm.
It's not guaranteed that these people will make decision that these are the decisions which are uh, right by itself, or what I'm saying is that it's not a similarly, it's not a guarantee of whether it was the right thing. But if you're going to look at those legal dramas, you look at how people, or sorry, not people, rather the lawyers,
Mm-hmm.
would make these elaborate and emotional speeches appealing to emotions and why should this person be acquitted or why this person should be convicted. Uh, while appealing to emotions is not a bad thing. We should leave this to regular ano, human conduct, to the exercise of human conduct. Because if we're going to put that in a judicial system, then it's going to go in conflict, for example, with how we understand things. What they're going to do is that they're going to decide, and if if the lawyer is uh, very if your speech is better than the other lawyer, then maybe the jury will rule in your favor. But then again, I don't know much about the jury system in relation to whether it was practiced in the Philippines and even the jury system of any other countries, aside from what I've seen in legal dramas. So I don't think I can make um what we call uh, a sufficient manifestation as to why it should be or should not be practiced in the Philippines. But with what I've known so far, that's what I think that it should not be. I think our court systems, as to giving the courts, which is through the judges, uh, administer justice, I think it is sufficient, and the right to have your case appealed to higher courts to correct any grave abuse of discretion for those judges in case that a person would think that this was not a good decision, then they can go to a higher court and say uh, maybe for the court of appeals or even later to the Supreme Court, where they could say that the lower courts were wrong, and this is why they are wrong, and this is why you should rule in our favor. So similarly, we look at again in relation to the exercise of justice, uh, Filipinos still have a recourse when they think that the lower courts erred in making their decision, because this may be because there was grave abuse of discretion, amounting lack or excess jurisdiction of such courts, which were done through the judges. So that's what I think. But again, I have a limited view on trial by jury, so this can be answered in the future by someone who is knowledgeable to this. But that's what I think.
When it comes to naman sa, let's say, if may ifa-file akong case, um, can you, for your own understanding, why we have a different type of court? So, para lang maintindihan ng mga tao, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, from what I understand, there's are three types of court. There's a regional trial court, uh, judicial court, then the Supreme Court.
Uh,
Mer
uh, uh, let's look into these courts
Yan,
as
yun.
what we call not really as to the type, but as to levels.
Kasi here's the
Uh,
thing, it is important to understand din na if you're gonna file a court, you have to first understand why merong levels of court na kailangan mong daanan, and the severity of the case. Kasi uh, may mga tao ako nababasa, lalo na online, even in respective publishing articles, na nagtataka sila kung bakit once na, like for example, dinala nila yung case nila sa Supreme Court. Ang Supreme Court, they have the right to reject or to dismiss the case. Now, why is it important to understand kung bakit we have a different type of level of court? Then, saan or paano mo muna ipoprocess yung case mo, depende sa severity of that case.
Okay, maybe we can look into this first as to the discussion of uh, what we call as to the discussion of uh, the courts or that are available in the Philippines. So there's in our judiciary, we can look at into it as to hierarchy, to a
Mm-hmm.
hierarchy. When we say hierarchy, that means there are levels, and you're right. Uh, some cases are limited to, for example, have uh, should be filed first in the lower courts. Some, because in some cases, if they are not within for example, I'm going to use advanced terms here, such as
Go lang.
exclusive jurisdiction of this particular court, and they'll say that we will be dismissing your case because the best court to hear as to your issues will have to be a court in a lower level. So again, that's a discussion of jurisdiction, and this is advanced. So we will try to simplify this
Mm-hmm.
discussion. But first, we need to look again as to the levels. So when we say levels, we look at the hierarchy. Now, when uh, we look at hierarchy, we look first at the stack. Let's approach this bottom to top. So in the lower courts, we can look at the what we call in the first level. This can be the metropolitan trial courts, municipal trial courts in cities, uh, basically those on of the level of municipal trial courts, and which is similarly situated depending on the type of, if I can recall, depending on the type of the place you're in. So municipal, basically these are municipal trial courts, the same level as in our in places in Mindanao where there are a significant Muslim population. We also have a Sharia circuit court. So that's uh, the first a court of basically it's where the first court that you're going to approach in depending on the cases. Uh, so that's the first. Now, if you want to move up, after that is the regional trial courts. Uh, Generally, criminal cases are heard in the regional trial courts. Again, this is depending on the case, and then there's also in the equivalent of that is Sharia district court, and again in places where there's Muslim a significant Muslim population. This is mainly in Mindanao, and then after that we have what we call those are in of the nature of appellate and courts that are appellate and collegiate in nature. Appellate because you want to go up to appeal, and then collegiate because as compared to those lower courts that I've mentioned before, those are courts where there are uh, in one sala there's one judge. In these collegiate courts, these are courts where these courts are composed of justices. Okay, so these include the usual Court of Appeals. Most of the time we hear about it. There's also Sandigan Bayan, which is the court that hears. Well, it really depends if upon recollection depends as to the position or salary grade, if I can recall, of a person in power. So Sandigan Bayan. We also have the Court of Tax Appeals. So your appeals involving tax. So you go there. And then lastly, we go to the Supreme Court. So the final decider of all decisions. So once the Supreme Court decides, and then when they decide upon finality, then it's permanent. It's good unless in future cases, this what we call precedents. So precedents is the concept of when a previous court has already decided where the when, for example, a previous Supreme Court has already decided on this matter, they and then a similar issue is in front of them. The Supreme Court can either um, affirm the precedents, meaning this is what has been decided before, previously, and we will apply this now similarly, or they can overturn precedents. That means that uh, while, for example, while there are views involving this issue before, we no longer hold the same view now. So the best example is as to, for example, this is also another. Well, I mentioned this earlier, but this is an advanced concept, which is psychological incapacity. In previous cases, because you invoke psychological incapacity to nullify a marriage. Uh, but that's for an advanced discussion. But basically that, and then previously, the Supreme Court would rule as to this, looking into psychological incapacity as a medical concept alone. That when when there's a discussion on the basis of psychological incapacity to nullify a marriage under Article 36, then we need med we need to look at it as a medical concept. That what will the psychologist say? What will the medical doctor say? Etc. Etc. Uh, in precedent by there was a case where Leonen was the ponente and uh, basically, the Supreme Court said, well, we are changing how we should view psychological incapacity as a basis to nullify marriage. Accordingly, we no longer look at it as purely medical in nature. We still recognize that of course, previously it was this, but now we are going to look at psychological incapacity as something that is legal in nature. So again, precedents can either be affirmed or overturned depending upon the court whose decision is who's making the decision on the basis of, oh, one can say a similar issue in the case at bar. Now again, now our rules on as to the procedure itself provides that there are certain cases which should be heard in lower courts, in municipal trial courts, and then there are cases where it is the regional trial court who has the jurisdiction over this. So again, what we're looking at jurisdiction. I've tried to simplify this, but the point of jurisdiction is the jurisdiction clothes this particular court the authority to decide an issue in front of them. Um, basically, a jurisdiction uh, uh, provides for whether this court uh, has the power to really decide on this, or are there other courts who have the what we call who have the jurisdiction over this. So again, it is really the power of the court uh, in determining a case. Now, again, it our laws provide that it depends upon the courts. There are cases where the Supreme Court would say that we are the wrong court to file this administrative issue. The best court is this court or that, etc., etc. But there are also instances where ah, the Supreme Court would say that, well, uh, we can overlook the procedural matter as to jurisdiction, especially with when it comes to cases of national importance. These are cases one can imagine these are cases where there is what we call a controversy which requires the immediate action of the Supreme Court. So the bigger questions really uh, goes into the Supreme Court itself, and then they'll decide that uh, because again, while we recognize that there are procedures into the administration of justice, there are really times where the Supreme Court will say that we will overlook the procedural infirmities, because in the best interest of justice and fairness or equity, deciding this matter as soon as possible is the best course of action available for the court. Uh, so again, it really depends. We cannot. It's a complicated and long discussion as to which courts have jurisdiction over things. So again, it is up to uh, it is up to a person who's filing a case to inquire through their lawyers, what should be done. So if this is the court, best best granted such, and etc., etc., etc. It's up to the court. No, it's up to the lawyer to look into our existing rules. Now, uh, decisions uh, decisions are not plainly given alone, or the power to adjudicate upon cases are not only given to the courts itself. Uh, what we mean by that, what we mean by that is that we have the existence of administrative agencies. So you will sometimes you'll hear that, okay, over my case involving what we call my license, example, etc. LTO, di ba? Uh, can ask you to come to their office and then explain yourself, and then they decide if there's a even if there's a complaint. So we have what we call the concept of administrative agencies, which are agencies granted a quasi legislative uh, quasi legislative quasi judicial powers. So these are, again, they can decide on the matters, while the Supreme Court, while our courts have, again, what we call the power to decide is granted to our court. It is also recognized that there is what we call uh, these courts are these administrative agencies are the best entities to hear this case given their particular specialty. So this may include cases in housing and land use. Before it was the HLURB. I'm not sure if it's still the same entity, or if it involves regulations as to transportation, the LTO, etc., etc. So then we also have our constitutional bodies, which include like the Commission on Elections. Uh, when there's an election issue, uh, the first entity that will should go into is the commission elections. This has exclusive original jurisdiction. When we say exclusive original jurisdiction, they alone should be the first people to hear about your election case. So another constitutional body include commission on audit, but this, upon recollection, this might involve cases where you uh, have a case which requires what we call possible reimbursement from the government, for example, uh, or involving your contract. So you first look at the commission on audit. So again, as the exercise of justice is, while vested in the Supreme Court and the lower courts, are also in a way adjudicated as granted by their powers provided by law to our administrative agencies, such as those aforementioned. So again, but it does not mean that they do not go to the court process again. Eventually, if you want to appeal those decisions, you go to the either to the Court of Appeals or to the Supreme Court. So yeah, that's my attempt to summarize the idea of the court in the Philippines in relation to jurisdiction, or basically their power to decide upon matters and things like that.
And thank you for sharing that. I know it's very complicated thing. And I hope na kahit papaano nagagrasp ng people yan. Now, let's go to privatization.
Mm.
As you know, I'm in favor of all public transit. I mean, all basically all to be privatized. We've been talking about since we were young, and recently, San Miguel has, I don't know, has been, is now the controller up until I think September ata mag-uumpisa sila. Anyway, by September, hawak na ng San Miguel Corporation ang NAIA, the entire NAIA, Ninoy Aquino International Airport. Now, in terms of privatizing, let's say, medical, in medical field, housing field, and food security for the people, yun yung medyo hindi ako nag-agree because that's the government's job to fulfill that. That's their role as a government. In terms naman sa private sa like sa electricity, petrol and other transportation like NAIA, for me, it's much more better na i-handle siya sa mga, sa mga business people. Kasi I'm not saying na they know everything, but kaya paano, we understand the procedure on going through it. At mas maganda na yung tutok sila. Other than the government is hati yung attention nila kasi hati yung attention nila sa national security, sa kailangan ng mga tao, that sort of thing. For me, mas maganda ng i-privatize ang NAIA para focus ang San Miguel doon sa mismong pagpapaganda sa NAIA. And yun yung ginawa nila sa SLEX, sa NLEX, even sa Skyway. Now, in your own opinion, what do you think about the recent privatization lalo na sa mga national highway, especially dyan sa Mindanao? Because I understand, marami ng bypass dyan. Marami ng new businesses coming to Mindanao and new way to privatize things.
Ah, well, um, this is interesting because generally when we say privatization, we look into how government, for example, government corporations
Mhm.
or what they used to operate or what they used to own are given to the private sector. In the case of NAIA, I don't I don't think it's purely
No,
privatization
no,
because
no. Bale hati sila sa, I think 60% ng income ng NAIA is mapupunta sa national government. So, with that, yes, I agree na hindi siya fully privatized, but in terms of operating it, it will be operating
yes.
as a private company or a private entity.
uh, we can look into it as you're right. In a way, what was granted to SMC or San Miguel Corporation was what we call uh, the management, uh, the management of NAIA. So, ayun, is it good news? Possibly, because I also hold the view that there are certain there are certain sectors of our government that should be best left to the private sector. Management of, for example, uh, utilities, or in this case, uh, for example, the management of airports. I think that it should be best left to private companies to manage. Yes, it is. Uh, at the end of the day, it is under the control of the government, but as to the day-to-day management, I believe it should be left to the private entities because uh, they best know what to do in making sure that uh, in that case, an entity is competitive and can compete with other airports. So I have no problem with that. Uh, and then same uh, as to our roads that there's going to be again the idea that while the management again of these roads are the I think there are the concept of what tollways, etc., to pay back for what was invested. I think these are very good examples of why the government should, in a way, uh, grant the private sector the power to do this clearly, because what we can learn is that if it's purely the government doing it, then most of the time they are not of the best what we call specifications.
Mhm.
Is The extent would be, for example, the least form of a partnership is of between the private public sector is to procurement. But then again, the concept of procurement is complicated. So we often look at that it might be the cheapest out there, but then again, it's because of the limitations of budget. But if we give certain parts of our, what, for example, again, the best example is to the management or what we call the day-to-day operations of, or like an airport. I don't think the government should be dealing with it. The extent should be as to security and making sure that our airports are safe from any attacks or any possible harm to any of the passengers. But as to the rest of the operation, it should be best left to the private sector. That's what I think. Um, what else? But again, it should be looked into similarly in a situation where uh, the power, for example, power. Originally, I think it was the government alone was operating, or not only operating, but rather not making, but rather what we call generating and then transmitting the power, etc., etc. It was the government alone, and then home. In one instance, it was divided into, I believe, three, and then granted to the private sector now. Uh, our views on that might depend on where you are. If you are in, for example, in the NCR where uh, blackouts are rare, then we'll probably look into it as maybe maybe the government uh, uh, was right in granting this authority to, not granting the authority, but rather granting the power transmission, etc., to the public sector. But when you're in a place where there are frequent blackouts, and then you're going to look into it as to, well, it might depend. The concept of cooperatives or electric cooperatives, some would think that they are ineffective. That's why in the case of Zamboanga, our local cooperative was now what we call partnered with a company involving power. Or in the case of Iloilo, Iloilo City, rather they do not have a what we call a cooperative anymore. What they have is uh, a company. I forgot which company it was, but rather a company alone does everything, and while it is effective in some parts, it is also ineffective in other parts, which may include again the instances of possible blackouts. So again, it really depends on when you ask, but as to that, I we can really leave it up to the wisdom of our laws or our government. Uh, but as to in cases where, again, like operation of airports or transportation, anything relating to transportation, not everything. If it involves terminals, etc., maybe we can leave it to the private sector. Uh, Maybe as well as in the future, maybe if they will find it possible to have a train system, etc., etc. I really think that the private sector is the best sector to respond to these issues because they know how to be competitive. Because when it is left to the government and applying the idea that if there's no in business or in economics, when there's no competition, for example, if it's only the government does this, most of the time it's going to be ineffective because there is what we call a monopoly because only one person is doing. But then again, I'm not saying this in a purely uh uh one one shoe uh purely on a situation where it's public versus private, because there are instances where we cannot delegate it to the private sector, which is national defense. This should not be left to the private sector,
Well,
national defense.
I think you have a great point about the national defense. Pero for me, if you need the supplies for the troops, you have to rely to the
Of
private
course.
sector because they're the ones who really investing. Let's say, creating the machinery, creating the guns. and the tanks and the helicopters. They're the ones who supplies that. Ngayon, in terms naman dun sa I agree naman na kailangan di siya kailangan maging privatized, but at least there's sense of co partnership or cooperative between the two
Of course.
parties para mas mapalakas yung national defense system natin.
Of course, of course. And I think the best way is really to look in the best response to this is that we look into the possibility of really look at where the private sector can best be effective in providing our government with the best services, and then look at instances where, for example, where the government is better at this. So I think it's again a combination of both worlds. That we should not treat there are certain things that we should not treat as purely public versus a purely private matter. I think a partnership really is the best between two sectors. Either it is uh, a partnership, or even if most of the work should be given to the private sector, then we leave it to the government when it enters into contact. So I think it's for now. I'm looking forward to the management of SMC of the NAIA, hoping to improve the conditions of one of the worst airports in the entire world. So I just hope that they do their best.
Yeah, we're wishing them all the best. In terms energy naman, like you've mentioned, the electricity dyan sa Iloilo, then sa Zamboanga, even here sa NCR. I have this opinion na if the Philippine government loosen up its restriction and when it comes to letting the privates um come up with a solution sa energy problem natin, it's gonna be much better. And one of the best example dyan is letting nuclear facilities operate here in the Philippines. We have one in Bataan. The problem is it is under the government, which is hindi siya open for I don't know, for some legal reason, and I understand that. Now, if the government lets the private sector, especially those who specializes in energy, brings nuclear here in the Philippines, it's gonna be much more cheaper. It's gonna be much more reliable na meron tayong dito. Kasi here in Manila, merong part sa NCR na have power interruption because of the maintenance. Now, there's some part of Mindanao meron talaga silang regular brownout for I don't know for 5-7 years na running because what they said is they have a low supply. Whether I agree to that or not, that's the problem between if the government keeps meddling on the energy sector. So, in 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 your own opinion, what do you think about losing up or letting the Philippines loosen up its hold on the energy sector?
Um, well, my thought on that, I'm going to say na limited pa naman ang alam ko tungkol dyan, pero uh, siguro I would just comment as to regulation kasi yun ang not only regulation but as to the overall government's exercise of authority over not only exercise of authority but rather the provision of the service through regulation of the private sector. I just hope that eventually the Philippine Congress will be able to sufficiently create laws that will allow the Philippines to at least meet the energy demands uh, that it requires because we are a growing population. Uh, we it's everything is almost requiring of electricity, if not all. The best that we have is really as to the government to do. So, if accordingly, if it is would be in their best interest to set up a new power plant or allow uh, the private sector to build a power plant, then it should be upon again our rule is that it should be upon the approval of the Philippine Congress as part of their authority. But with that in mind, we cannot fully grant the private sector everything because it is important that we regulate this because that is the point of a government. When the government conducts its regulation, what it's trying to do is make sure that in the exercise of the private sector's rights to conduct its business affairs is that it's going to be fair to all of us. So, example, uh, we should they prohibit what they can in the regulation is knowing as to in how much uh a consumer should pay for their electricity, etc. So again, while we recognize a certain degree of effectivity and efficiency of the private sector to meet many of our issues, I think it all boils down to again what the government should do, and what it should allow, what it should authorize, and this boils down to regulation. I personally believe in the power of, I believe in nuclear power. Uh, but then again, knowing as to where we sit in the Pacific Ring of Fire, I think uh, this morning or last night between those two, there was an earthquake in Taiwan. Again,
Mm-hmm.
Taiwan is just above the Philippines. Now,
Mm-hmm.
when we operate a nuclear power plant, for example. I don't know much about the specifics of it, but I just hope that eventually, if the government intends to um, authorize the private sector or by itself operate its own nuclear power plant, then we just hope that it is best regulated. And this comes with a wish that I hope that eventually people appointed in the government are those who have the knowledge as to the operation, or not only operation, but rather this their mastery or knowledgeable as to these certain sectors, because we have to recognize that some appointments are in nature political. Uh,
That's just the
when we
sad reality of it, to be honest with you.
oh,
I mean, again,
of
sorry to
course,
cut you off, pero like I understand na in regulation, kaya I mean required ang government to have regulation para lang ma-maintain yung price. But here's the thing, 'di ba? Um, if you keep regulating ano certain things, especially sa energy, magiging constraint ang isang company to operate. Now to invest on a new technology, to invest on new let's say new ways to pump up the supply. Now, sana naman like you said earlier, sana kapag magkakaroon ng isang entity, sana naman yung ilalagay nila doon sa pwesto is knowledgeable, na they're more knowledgeable in the nuclear space than people who are, just proficient in business law. Kasi there's really times na nasa regulation ang nakaupo is hindi nila major yun eh. Hindi talaga nila alam a certain things, or hindi nila alam paano i-dive deep yung mga tanong nila. So, when it comes to regulation, I disagree na kailangan ng regulation kasi it really restrains the movement of the company. Once na may mga ganyang regulation, ang hirap gumalaw, mahirap mag-invest on a new technology. What do you think?
it was decided from almost 100 years ago that the Philippines, I think it was in the case of Robi versus Provincial Board of Oriental Mindoro, where the Supreme Court said that we have already let go of the concept of laissez-faire. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but the policy of laissez-faire, where businesses are free to do what they do, because again, the nature of the evolution of government is eventually to regulate people and persons, because persons can only can be natural or juridical, etc., etc., etc. But the point is, yes, while we recognize that regulation can be a limitation to the exercise of business, uh, it all boils down to who creates these regulations in the first place. Now, in our constitution, it all boils down to the body that creates laws, the Philippine Congress. Through their law, they set up regulations in the country. Now, the best way for people to, in a way, exercise, not in a way, but rather the only way they fully manifest their want towards a future policy is that as to the people they vote. Uh, and the people they vote matter. And if these people are just, I don't know, politicians by virtue of that because they inherited from their parents, and not because they are familiar, for example, with the emerging trends uh, for example, artificial intelligence, etc., then we're really doomed to be a country where a Filipino business can never jump higher than what it has now because our regulations limits these businesses, and purely because the people who created these regulations in the first place are the politicians, and those politicians are elected by the people. So in a way, the Filipinos, I guess, are reaping what they are sowing when they vote these people, and these same people create the same regulations that limit their potential. So it's in the people talaga, no?
Yeah, that's the thing. Also, I mean, I like to point out na sana naman in the in the coming election, please vote for the right person. Hindi lang dahil malaking personality nila sa media or dahil sumasayaw sila sa advertisement. Just please don't. Like, nakaka-stress isipin na you're putting people on Congress na it doesn't even know how to, how to start a business, or doesn't know how to manage business. That's the problem. Even like in-encourage, I don't know if umabot dyan sa Ilo the issue about the Binance Binance ata na binan ng SEC.
Finance,
Yeah. So
SSCS.
yeah. So people in the people in the Congress doesn't even know what cryptocurrency is. They don't, like, oh my god, people, please, I cannot stress this enough. Uh, okay, so you mentioned our constitution, and the way we do business here in the Philippines is based on the our own current constitution and the corporate uh rules here in the Philippines. Ngayon, I earlier I mentioned the 1935 Constitution. I didn't mention it dahil lang yun yung nasa top of my mind. The reason I mentioned it is because that constitution, I'm not saying this is a factual, okay, but when I read this constitution, our old 1935 constitution, nakabase siya sa the way how the US runs their country. They have 4-year term for two term, 4-year for two term. Even the presidency, even sa Senate, sa Congress, and how we really do things here in the country. That that changes when President Marcos changes our constitution to parliamentary. When he becomes the president, now merong prime minister, Pilipinas. I don't know if people know that na meron tayong naging prime minister nung in the early 70s, or early 70s and to the early 80s. With that, there's a floating around here in the Philippines na constitutional change, or cha-cha for that matter. For me, I know a lot of people are divided in this issue kasi uh I don't know why we're so struggling or really gripping on the 1986 Constitution, or dahil lang sa nakaupo ngayon. I don't want to mention that, but nung panahon pa ni Duterte, one of the reason I voted for Duterte is because he said that he will push for federalism. And for those who don't know what federalism is where you're basically putting all the region uh into accountability. So for example, let's say there are three states here in the Philippines: Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao. For an example, Luzon controls its own sovereignty, their own economic provision. Visayas is the same, and Mindanao. Now, that didn't happen, and one of the main reason kung bakit gusto ko ng federalism and basically constitutional change is because, again, the business practice that we have. Here in the Philippines, foreigners can't really invest the whole businesses here in the country because of the 60-40 rule. For those people who don't know, um, Filipino must own 60% of the stock of the company, and foreigners must only have 40%. Basically, to empower Filipinos who are doing business in the country. What happens is, um, nagiging, how do you say this without even, having controversial say, but nagiging monopoly siya in a way na because of that rule, big businesses like, for example, IKEA, they have to partner with SM, one of the biggest conglomerate here in the country. They have to do that instead of having their own entity. With that, again, I'm speaking on the business aspect. For you, when the constitutional change started to happen, and lalo na may mga pirma na nangyayari sa bawat region dito sa Pilipinas, what do you think of it? Are you opposed to it, or are you eager to say, okay, let's see where it goes from here?
Uh, that's a good question. I've been accept uh I've been accepting of the idea that there should at least be a certain degree of change in our system in the Philippines. For example, I am a person who is open to the idea that we should have federalism. I'm from Zamboanga. We know for a fact that it's been for so long. Mindanao has been left behind as to the country's developments, and that's why there are people who are, especially those in Mindanao, who strongly supports Duterte and again his campaign as to that. But again, what the problem is as to the safeguards, because while we may allow this to happen, uh, the what we call statements against this is what boils down to the fact that are we empowering the local are we empowering the same local governments who are generally the same trapos, pals, who most of the time inherited their right to these positions by virtue of because they have the same family name. So that's a problem. Uh, while I am open to the fact that uh, the concept of federalism will allow uh, our different the different parts of the country to have a stronger say, not only stronger say, but rather in the exercise of their local governments. The problem with that is what happens when it's the same people but greater power. The same people who is, for example, causing the problems in these parts of Mindanao. I will not say which surnames, but yes, the difference is the difference between our current state of local autonomy, which is granted by the local government code and the constitution, versus if in the case of a federal system, is that in the federal system, we might be just empowering the same people that is causing these problems, right? Again, I'm not sure if uh, these are really people of the best minds in the country to hold our local governments. We're basically making them emperors of their own empires once we allow this to happen, right? Remember, there are certain surnames that uh, dominate local politics. They may not dominate national politics, but they might as well would seem as their own emperors in their own little empire. So what happens when we empower these little emperors to empower them? So I think I'm I don't know, no, I will not mention any surnames, but again, what happens like, if these are would deemed as thugs or what we call lords of their own places, di ba? Mga meron silang private armies, etc., etc. So the difference basically is just we granted them more power. So again, it all boils down to how do we respond to this? It's just that they're the same ruling people. Well, yes, federalism might be good, especially as to allow governments to local governments to rule themselves. But we first also need to look at again what happens next. What happens when there's an election and then the entirety of your government is composed of the same surname. or two surnames, di ba? Uh, for now, so what I can say is that we must first look at the future of the Bangsamoro. They are, by our 1987 Constitution, granted the autonomy, just like, well, the Cordillera, but the Cordillerans have not uh, ap- what we call approved of their own exercise of autonomy, but of the same level as Bangsamoro. So, but in the case of Bangsamoro, yes. So we have the Bangsamoro Organic Law, which was again is a law that powers through as what the Constitution grants, the powers the Muslim Mindanao to have a greater say or a greater exercise in their local government. They until now they still have uh, they're members of their government, so members of the Bangsamoro Parliament are composed of people appointed by the president to different nominations, which may have been nominated through the MILF, etc. But they did not have any elections that is into the level of the members of parliament. So, di ba? Meron silang elections nung before sa mga local, pero yung members of parliament wala. So, siguro what we can say now is before we can move forward to that, maybe we can look at how they will work by the next time that they will have their elections. When they have their elections, then ayun. Siguro I guess we can for now we can wait and look at to the Bangsamoro question more.
Wow, I never really thought of that way. I mean, you brought new perspective sa akin kasi I mean, you're right. Like if we let people have more power in their local communities, ang mangyayari doon, it's gonna be their little empire. Like I know, even though even though we have we have basically voting rights here in the country, but the how we vote kasi is much more different on how other peoples in other countries voted. I don't know why, but if pangalan, like for example, let's say ma malakas yung apelyido mong Dagandan, for sure mananalo ka sa Mindanao. That sort of thing. Again, for example, di ko sinasabing malakas ang Dagandan, but that's just an example. But yeah, what a great point kasi here's the thing, before all of that, I really I really think na one of the reason kung bakit maganda ang federalism lalo na sa Mindanao is because Mindanao is so rich in in resources and talented people. Now, once you give them a little freedom of power, a little power to to act autonomously, Mindanao will be much more greater than Manila. To be honest with you, ganun ako kalakas yung faith sa Mindanao because if you know sa Cagayan de Oro sa may bandang Bukidnon, the places were so beautiful once na ma-develop yon, lalo na nagiging agricultural space siya sa Mindanao, the more supply in food ang magiging Mindanao, hindi magiging scarce ang food sa Mindanao. And mas maganda pa once na, for example, na magkaroon ng federalism, there's gonna be an importation law. Now, kapag i-export nila yung product nila sa, let's say, sa Visayas and Mindanao, they're gonna have much more capital or much more money coming in Mindanao because of that bunch of products na i-export nila. I mean, that's a great point. Yeah. I don't know what to say next kasi, o nga, no? Like, if we give people the more power, mas magiging control nila yung communities nila. Wow. Just wow.
That is a certain ano talaga fact of life talaga no na even though we want to support the system of giving yun na nga more autonomy, but the problem is if these are the same people who's ruling our local governments, the difference again is just that they are empowered, more powers are granted to them, then maybe it's not really the best course. But again, we must look into the next 10 years after the election, siguro 5 to 10 years after the election sa parliament ng BARM kasi sila naman ang may uh, yun na nga, granted nga by the Bangsamoro Organic Law and by the Constitution nga. In the first place, the autonomy in a way is acting like parang an not in a way, but rather is acting as an autonomous region. Like, likely parang an experiment for us to look when eventually we can adopt the federalism in the country. But for now, the local government code and even the recent Mandanas, it seemed recent, but maybe it's from 3 years ago, 2 years ago. The Mandanas ruling, basically, the point is that local governments will now have a greater share in our taxation, in the taxes that is collected by the Philippine government. So when we look into that, kasi I know that there was an EO issued by Duterte, which, for example, certain what we call functions or operations by the national government will now be given to the local governments because now they now have because of the Mandanas ruling or the ruling which gave local governments more share in the overall national taxation. With that, we can look for one example be for example a hospital operated under the control of the DOH will now be given to the local government, for example, to operate. Now we leave the operation to you because now you have the money to operate it. Diba? Parang, in a way, that is what we call, in a way, that is still what we call an exercise, seeing local governments exercise more power. And the best way to exercise power is when you have the money. And in this case, because they now have a greater revenue share, then ayun, you did that. So for now, yun yung magandang ruling. I think ginusto naman talaga ito ah, ng mga nasa local government. Pero so for now, yun na lang muna and then we again look at the the Bangsamoro will succeed or what's the outcome of the future of the incoming Bangsamoro elections. And after that, we look at, okay, ito ang nangyari sa Bangsamoro, possibly this might happen for the rest of the country. So, should we have a federalism, then yun ang base natin.
That is true. And also, if there are listeners right now na nagtataka, how about the economy of the Philippines? First of all, our our economy is one of the stable in the Southeast Asia. So, I mean, sabihin nyo man na, paano naging stable, hindi namin random. Like, statistically speaking, Philippines has one of the most stable economies in the Philippines. That's why it's attracting World Bank. That's why it's attracting foreign investors. The problem is, again nga, the 60-40 rule dito sa Pilipinas. With that, okay, how about this? You know the thing na sinabi ni former President Duterte na isa-separate niya yung Mindanao sa Pilipinas. I know you're smiling. I know he's smiling. For me, hindi ko alam yung buong aspect of this, but I think it's been 7 times since may nag-propose na hihiwalay ang Mindanao sa Pilipinas since sa panahon pa ni Marcos yon. That's why there's MILF, there's I don't know, other Muslim authorities na nabuo because they want to separate Mindanao from the Philippines. Now, when you think of it, if magse-separate yung Mindanao sa Pilipinas, how is it the economy impact lalo na sa Mindanao? Kasi again, Mindanao, I'm not saying Mindanao is underdeveloped, it's rising, but proposing it as as a viable thing, it's pretty scary kasi like paano naman kami na we have our hometown in Mindanao, so kailangan ng tatatakan ng passport, kailangan namin ng visa to do that. In your opinion, lalo especially you're living in Zamboanga, what do you think about the proposal of, you know, um living Mindanao leaving the Philippines?
Uh, Ayun nga 'no, my opinion as to that is that, uh, we should dismiss that in the first place, you know. While yes, there are those that have who are presently and some previously in power who's asking, for example, for Mindanao to separate from the rest of the Philippines. But my opinion is that that should have never been what we call entertained in the first place. Because I am a firm believer of what we call the totality of the Philippines, strong Philippines. So if there are really problems, then we can probably through, of course, an empowered citizenry can set a course as to how they can improve the situation. In our case in Mindanao, 'di ba? We can best improve our situation if we only elect the right leaders, 'di ba? So, what do I think of Mindanao separatism or Mindanao separating from the rest of the country? Again, I think this should be dismissed. Again, really not uh, something that we shouldn't entertain in the first place. Again, it's really easy to say that, but the cost of operating a country is again uh, different. Because it doesn't mean that you're an independent country that you can uh, survive alone, 'di ba? The concept of what we call certain concepts such as national reliance, that a state alone can function without the rest of the country, is such a thing of the past. Those
Mm-hmm.
who think that they can just start a country and then survive by itself in such a globalized world uh, should look best into, for example, North Korea. 'Di ba? They are the same people saying that we are independent from the rest of the world, that we can do this. Such a North Korea thing to say, the
Yeah.
example of self-reliance, that they can alone survive, etc., etc. But, di ba nga, they can't. Uh, di ba? If they can't. They're really going to the possibility of famine, plus, di ba, having to ayun na nga, what you call, overcome sanctions by illegally trading kasi it happens, gano'n talaga. Ang hirap. So, easier said than done yung Mindanao separation, and especially knowing that uh, many of the poorest provinces in the country are situated in Mindanao,
Mm-hmm.
'di ba? So, we say na, we'll just separate, but then again, can we really do it? Do we know the costs of actually operating a country? Just like treating a just like hindi lang naman 'to kasing simple ng just treating it as a business that, because I already have the capital, I can do everything, 'di ba? Kasi in business, sige gano'n, capital, yes, pero for the rest of, in the study of international relations, you also have to deal with neighbors. You also have to deal with, what do you call, relations with other countries. What if kulang tayo sa oil, 'di ba? Ayun, where will we get oil, et cetera, et cetera. Again, Philippines is poor. Many of the provinces of the Philippines nasa Mindanao, and that's the sad thing that which we hope which will be eventually corrected in the future. So, ayun, should not be entertained in the first place.
And I think for me, if gusto ng local or ng national government to improve the Mindanao, is just to give them more budget. I know it's easier said than that, but if you imagine like putting the entire budget of NCR and half of it ilagay mo sa Mindanao, a lot of Mindanao uh, uh, well Mindanao government can really put that money to use. Hopefully, if they're not corrupt, like you said earlier, you open a wider perspective para sa akin because again siguro dahil like like sarado sa business, but I agree with all of the things that you said na if we still elect the people who have a lot of things, 'di ba? Like it's difficult talaga. Um, last thing. I would like to hear your thoughts about this. Our current president, Mr. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. Um, one of the best things na nagustuhan ko sa administration niya is the ease of doing business. Para lang magkaroon ka ng idea, Michael, during 2018, 2017, it's very difficult to start a business, especially to incorporate a business. There's a lot of legal documents have to fill up. You need to hire lawyers to fill up. Right now, it's easy. It's online. It's basically one of the things that this media company is alive because of that ease of doing business. Um, in your in your perspective, what does this current president do na impress you at the same time needs more work?
Sige, but again, I'll only share this as to the lens of my personal lens, no? Siguro as to the best thing, siguro is that what we call, siguro I'd like to say na uh, the best thing siguro is as to parang uh, our government stance, the again president of government stance as to the West Philippine Sea. Because again, days ago there were reports about a certain uh, gentleman's agreement, diba? That
Yeah,
Bahari Roque is saying that is valid because it was entered into by the Philippine president and the paramount leader of China, Xi Jinping, diba? And then
yeah,
I was thinking na parang, bakit hindi natin 'yan alam, 'di ba? Suddenly meron na palang mga agreements entered into by our government in places where we should have at least, what we call, we should have at least have the knowledge to know na, ganito pala, nag-agree pala sa ganito, 'di ba? And in a way, parang we've seen consistent stance from the Philippine government, whether it's the PCG or AFP, that they're saying na ganito, we should exercise, ganito. And even the DFA, no? Because the study naman talaga of international relations is complicated. So
mm-hmm.
for now, in respect to the rule of law, we do protests, di ba? Et cetera, et cetera. So i- some would say na it's not enough. For me, this is improvement from the previous way that we look at how, yun na nga, no, previous way we've seen things in the previous elevation. So, rooms for improvement, of course, uh, maybe uh, less traveling, I guess. Dapat iwasan na natin yan. Maybe it's time to go back to the many and visit the many places in the country and looking ways to resolve many of our local uh, problems with the national lens, di ba? Parang ngayon, parang I think parang nakakasawa na rin ata marinig na may travel sa ibang bansa. So yun lang. But then again, it's a personal lens, let's take it with a grain of salt, so take it seriously, and I think the best people really to talk about this are those who are already, what we call up there or those who are really knowledgeable about this. Ako, ordinaryong Pilipino lang naman. Yun yung opinion.
And that's the best way to end this podcast. Again, Mike, I can talk all politics all day, all night with you. Na-miss ko. Parang alam mo ba yung ano, siguro kalikitaan nitong podcast na to, naalala ko yung mga bata pa tayo. Nakaupo tayo sa sofa nila nanay, talk about crazy things. Minsan to the point na nagsisigawan na kasi we're in a disagreement. Like, it brings back memories, Mike. I mean, thank you so
Oo
much
nga.
for coming.
Thank you for the invitation din kuya 'no, and an opportunity to, not only take part of your endeavor as a person who's, contributing in the Philippine media landscape, but also in a way to have been given the opportunity din to share personal views.
Yeah. Again, Mike, thank you so much sa time mo, and I really do appreciate it. And if hindi mo pa to naririnig sa amin, we're so proud of you, Mike. Like your entire family natin is so proud of the work that you've done. I know you're still a student, but come on, man. Like, the things that you've done is much more greater than um we all expected from you. Like, thank you so much, and we're so proud of you, my guy.
Thank you, Kuya. And again, thank you for this.
So with that being said, peace out, people.
Thank you, thank you.